Okay, well, welcome everyone to this session of the Emeritus College Travel Group program. And of course, this is the first program for the new academic year. And we welcome Peter Wing and Claire Weeks, who've spoken to us a number of times in the past to present today. Um, Before we get started with the presentation, I just wish to acknowledge that I live in the unceded ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I expect that some of you will live similarly and others will live in different unceded territories. So I'm going to ask Peter and Claire to take over the session now and introduce themselves for those people who may not have attended one of their sessions before, and then proceed directly to their presentation. So if you wish to share the screen now, Peter and Claire, please do so.
Well, I am Peter.
Gone again.
You've gone again.
Yeah, I am definitely not Peter. I'm Claire, a retired rehab back from GS Long.
And I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon. And we've been retired for about
Many years.
15 plus years. And we try to, when we travel, combine, if we can, several goals. So we may be away for quite a while, and this is no exception. It was a trip out to the Orient, and we'll explain it in a series of chapters so that you'll know where we are in the whole thing. There are 13 chapters. I'm not quite sure why it worked out to 13, but that's the way it is. On this trip, we were coming through Nepal, and we had to visit the program that we've been working with for the last 15 years. And there were some new trainees who had taken on about a year ago to become rehabilitation specialists. At the right hand end is Raju, the person we work with all the time. So in moving down to India from there, we had to get a visa to go through India, which you need to know about, Indian e-visa. And also we needed an eSIM card, and the Nomad we got because it works in Nepal as well as other countries. So this shows the areas we were traveling from Kathmandu to Bengaluru, which is down there, the star on your screen. And then we stayed one night there and we went up to Hampi, and maybe Claire will tell us why we went to Hampi.
Yes, I think I put a summary in this when we suggested doing this talk, but you may not all remember. Many years ago, probably 25 years ago, good friends of ours from here took their kids out of school and went to India for a year. And they traveled widely, had a great time. But when they came back, Susanna, who may or may not be on the show here, told us that the most impressive thing that they had seen all year was this ruin at Hampi. And it stayed in our minds.
Stayed in Claire's mind.
Stayed in Claire's mind for a very long time. We've been near there on a couple of occasions and never quite got there. So we decided to make it a destination on this trip.
And the other destination was going to be Sri Lanka. So as we looked at this, there's a non-stop 3-hour flight from Kathmandu to Bengaluru. And then from there, it was an overnight train ride up to Hampi. Then we went back down to Bengaluru and then to Madurai, which is down here. And we spent 3 nights there before going to Sri Lanka. So this is a summary of that trip.
Chapter 2.
So here we are in the Bengaluru airport, just arriving. It's quite a fancy airport. It's a high-tech town, and so parts of it are really quite prosperous, and parts of it are just like the India that you imagine. So we had booked a place that was fairly central for one night, and it happened to be New Year's Eve. And we were told that we only found this out after we got there, that the previous New Year's Eve, they'd been using water cannon and so forth to slow down the revelers on New Year's Eve. And we might decide that we didn't want to go out that night. We went out earlier, and when we came home it was like this, and we must have slept through the worst of it because we had no trouble. But it was a nice place.
There was no trouble.
There was no trouble, and the police had changed the way that people flowed through and carried on. So we had one day there before we got on the train, and so we were timidly getting into Indian life because this was an Uber tuk-tuk. So it came without any sort of great fanfare, and it took us to the Modern Art Museum. Claire.
Now, there just happened to be an exhibit by this artist who goes by the name of Mani, M-A-N-I, These are just two of a very big exhibit of his work, and which we really enjoyed tremendously.
Quite an interesting little place. But then we had to try and find various things in the streets, and the streets can be a bit intimidating at first. As you walk into the market areas, it gets tighter and tighter, and everything goes. So motorbikes, everything in bulk, food, clothing, jewelry.
This was a procession we never did find out what it was a
And we see this strange little chariot coming towards us, and we don't know what aspect of the religion it was representing, but not many people seem too flustered about it. And the 5 plastic elephants on the front had us a bit puzzled, but I'm sure there's some significance to this. And in those areas, everything is picturesque, but buildings look as if they're going to fall down. You're surrounded by temples. That's the Hindu temple on the right there. Highly decorated, highly anthropomorphic. Bear that in mind when you see some of the ruins that we saw later.
So that's a style of temple that we'd never seen before. We've mostly been in northern India previously, and this is the style is called Dravidian. Anybody who's an art historian here will know a lot more about it than we do. But it was very characteristic of all of the temples we saw, large and small there. And there's statues of gods, but also of creatures that have nothing to do with religion, animals and so forth. But very highly colorful, painted, and having to be repainted on quite a frequent basis.
So on to the next chapter, because we only stayed there for a day, and the next night we were going to sleep on the train. We'll talk a little bit about going by train. Those of you who travel may be aware of a website called The Man in Seat 61, and you can get advice on traveling by train in any country of the world, and his section on train travel in India was extremely helpful. You can, if you follow that little thing to the right where it says buy tickets, you'll actually bypass the Indian railway system and get into a broker, and they will do things for you. Or you can decide to do it yourself, which we did. And we were able to book the ticket and the overnight to Hampi, which is about 400 odd kilometers, takes about 12 hours. And we decided we would go second class air conditioning, and then we thought, well, perhaps we'll move up for the first time. We moved up to first class, and for the overnight trip for 400 odd kilometers, and for the two of us, it was $45 in first class.
First class to air condition.
Yeah. As of recently, you have to get a form of authorization, just as you probably do from your bank if you go online. So there's some new rules for that. The trains are really fairly modern, been fairly well kept up, not all of them. We had an overnight trip, and we got into a little town called Hosapete at about 6:30 in the morning. It was quite chill, and we got a tuk-tuk to take us the last 30 minutes or so to Hampi. And Hampi is a funky little down-at-heel little town with little stores and so forth around. But even at that time in the morning, there are people out making these wonderful little mandalas, which they put out freshly every morning. Everyone's different from every other, rather like a snowflake. And then we wandered, because nothing was open yet, we wandered through the village to the back, and we came across this amazing site, which is the Virupaksha temple. It's an enormous temple. It's about 1 kilometer long, and we will see more of it later. But this is the big tank they had in front, and people were just starting to move around. This one enterprising young fellow came up and sold us a small guidebook, which was actually very helpful. Here's the temple itself, and so we were just beyond that enormous.
It's a temple complex. It encompasses
Correct.
all of that.
And so, if you look at the tall tower on the right, the last picture was taken on the other side of that. So we found a little place that was open to have some breakfast until our bed and breakfast was open. And this was a fairly modest bed and breakfast. We had a nice room with a shower and so forth right in the middle of town. Not fancy, no particular facilities, and I think it cost us about 60 Canadian dollars a night, something like that. We just had it for the 2 nights, and then the bracketing nights either side were spent on the train. So that moves us on to the next chapter, to our 4 days there. This first map shows the UNESCO boundary, because it's a UNESCO Heritage Site, and the yellow area in the middle is the UNESCO area. And then they have a kind of a boundary area, which is the pink one currently, and they think it should be expanded. We don't know why. It's probably on the basis of archaeological remains and so forth. And there's a river runs through it, which you'll see at one point. And then the other maps that are more helpful are the ones that give us a little more detail. This is put out by the local tourist group, and they have 100-odd temples and so forth just in this one small area. And if you look at the color-coded boxes there's a red box and a blue box and so forth. Each of those is about enough for a day's sightseeing, because the total area of this UNESCO site is about 10 kilometers by 8 kilometers, and there's a tremendous amount of walking. Okay, so the first day we went out, we were walking in the area that was from blue, and they do suggest that cycling is appropriate, but we didn't bother renting bikes, and I'm glad we didn't, because it would have been too bumpy and too awkward. And then the other days, one day spent on the green ride, which was, we took a tuk-tuk around there, and then another day we went to the royal area, which is the red one. So these are just the different days. And we're going to give you a taste for this, rather than a thorough explication of everything we saw. There were these wonderful rocks, which we saw everywhere.
Yeah, the rock formations, I have no idea how they were formed, but they're these enormous rounded boulders, and they were pretty much everywhere that the town wasn't. And town was built in and up around them. We were about to go up all these stairs, and then there was a path that, as you'll see very soon, took us by the river and then to some of the older temples.
If you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see these young men all wearing the same type of habit. And we saw a number of groups, often wearing light clothing, which is a religious garb, and they're often on a pilgrimage to this area. This long thoroughfare went all the way down from where they were to the big temple at the other end. Down the sides there were these old what had been stores, and it's called the Hampi Bazaar, in fact, all the way down. One side seemed to be empty and the other side seemed to be well populated with monkeys.
So this is where you walk through from that area at the top of the steps on a paved area to the first temples. We should say all of this was developed between around the 13th and 15th centuries, and was at one time the largest city in the second largest city in Asia. I don't know what the population was, but it was a destination city for Hindus. It was a Hindu-controlled, and finally it fell to Muslim conquerors. Was it 1560s or something? Yeah.
Some parts were busy, and some parts really we had it to ourselves, even though it's a very popular place, because there is just so much to see. And you can wander through these areas, and clearly they were built to last. This particular one is not ornate. Others are much more ornate, as you'll see in a bit. And if you look at the terrace below us, the parquet that's been put in there of the stone tiling, very irregular, but often made to fit beautifully. And some of them had more ornate pillars inside. So you can see this is rather like the Hindu temple that we'd seen earlier in Bengaluru, and these probably would have been fully plastered in their day.
Painted.
And probably painted. The stone facade is usually just lower down. And at this point we had seen the river, and it's possible to go out. I think there's a small reservoir downstream, so you can rent a little coracle and go out and probably cool off. This one's called the Vitala Temple, and it was really quite a large complex, and it obviously had a number of visitors. People come on day trips and so forth. And I'll draw your attention to a couple of points. This This particular pavilion on the right had the most amazing roof. When you went inside, there were just 4 pillars supporting it. I think there were about 53, 54 wedge-shaped stones that provided its roof or ceiling, just amazingly carefully fitted. And the weight on those pillars must be enormous.
Chariot races were held here historically, and apparently they had some religious significance as well as a sporting significance. And this picture is a stone chariot there that represents what went on in the area.
And for some reason, everybody was taking a photograph of it.
It turns out that the 50 rupee bill has the chariot on it, so everybody was trying to line up their bill with the actual chariot and take photos of it.
These weren't our photos, these were from the internet, but you have no trouble in finding these.
But everybody was doing them.
And I really admire the one on the right because they got their bill and the distance correct when they took the photograph for it to absolutely mesh. Rather clever. This is in the same complex, and here you can see some very fine scroll work on the left and quite amazing ornate details. Everybody taking family portraits there. This was another large area we went to. This was what's called the Royal Centre, and again each of these is the temple, and this area is probably, I think you can see here, a couple of kilometres across. This was a gorgeous temple. It was said to be virtually air conditioned. And I think we didn't see this because the upstairs part is not accessible, but there's a water tank of some sort upstairs and water flows down. I'm not sure if it's into the stone or through the stone, which would provide cooling, which in the hot temperatures even then it could have been really quite troublesome in summer. And with the close-up, we'll take a look inside one of these archways because it's really quite different and quite beautiful. And from a photographic perspective, to try and get all those arches in focus and exposed was a bit challenging. Looking much more Islamic than it is Hindu. And if you like to guess what this is, it's a parking garage for elephants. It's an elephant stable. Apparently one of the kings was very fond of elephants. I did read that he had over 100 elephants, so I'm not sure where all the rest of them stayed. Maybe this is where they were just kitted out when they went for a walk. We don't know what this particular building is, and clearly it's aging a bit.
Well, it was the basis of a larger building. There was something. This is the wall surrounding the base of something, and the building that was on top of it was destroyed at the time that the whole town was sacked. But the carving was left intact, and it's beautiful.
And each level was telling a story, a cartoon as you went from right to left here, I think. And this area, they had a large stepped tank, which is where people could wash, and you can see that seasonally the water level in here varies quite a bit. And it had a stone trough waterway, as you can see at the top left there. If you follow the line on the left away from us, it goes off into the distance, and about halfway down there's an offshoot that goes to the right and then feeds in, as you can see, on the far side of this tank. And this is covered an area of several acres. Not a very prepossessing building from the outside. This is actually the Queen's Bath, and it had a moat around it, which probably would have been full of water in its day. And then inside it had a sort of a double wall with a tank inside, which looks something like this. What we're just seeing here is the mould that darkens the stone over time. You can see a whitish stone on the lower front left where the water might have been drained out. Some beautiful architectural details. A few of the buildings still had intact inner recesses where there had been less climate damage to the stonework, and these were quite beautiful. There was one building that had a darker stone, and this was a form of granite that had been brought in many hundreds of miles and was a much finer stone, so lent itself to much finer detail. I think we saw that in just this one building.
It was.
And this is a temple of Ganesha, the elephant. And if I remember correctly, this elephant is made out of one piece of stone. Didn't see it out for a walk. And in some areas, there were lots of these little temples. In the area above Virupaksha, the big temple. And these were in and around these massive boulders. And every building would have many, many carvings on it, so they must have had an enormous population of very skilled masons. This now was a little bit further away, although it has the same type of tower as the Virupaksha. We were walking through here to something a little more interesting up and behind it. So we walked along the wall and then up behind. And this is what we saw, this strange split rock with a little temple on the top. And I should turn over to Claire here, because you talked to this chap.
Well, it was very, very inviting. So we went in and we paid our respects, and I think I was told everything was going to be hunky-dory for the rest of my life. And then we left. And in these areas there are a number of perched stones. And I must say, when our tuk-tuk driver offered to take a photograph, I put my hand up, but I was loath to push at all because I was afraid it would squash Claire like a mosquito. We got away with it. There was another big complex that was set down in the valley area, which must account for the grass being greener. Claire, do you want to tell the story? Yeah, this is an incredible story. This tuk-tuk was called Susan, and the driver was just standing there, so we asked him why he named it Susan, and he told us that he had taken a tourist, somebody like us, on a tuk-tuk drive at one point. And
from the States?
Somebody from the States. And they got to talking, and he told her the story of his life, which was of a typically impoverished person growing up. And she decided that she would take him on as a project. And so she bought him a tuk-tuk. And when it eventually deteriorated, she bought him a replacement for it.
That's another sort of 14 or 15 years later, I think.
Yeah.
So this was the new one.
So this is his brand new Susan tuk-tuk. We thought it was a wonderful story.
He was with us for a couple of days. Nice guy. Lots of people around in groups.
Everyone wanted a picture with us.
Yes, we were the exotic ones, and actually we saw very, very few Caucasians around. It certainly is a destination for people from that part of the world, much more.
Well, for pilgrims as well to go to the temple.
Yes, and some of them are in uniforms, some of them are in school uniforms, some of them, I don't know what these signify. It was nice to have a picture with them. This one was rather lovely because although this looks like a rather rough surfaced stone, everybody, children, adults and so forth, were using this as a slide and were sliding down the rock. Sometimes people are just waiting peacefully. And there are animals around. Another group of pilgrims on the left there feeding a monkey. And this little calf seemed to be quite friendly. They have an elephant in the temple that's taken out every day to go down to the river and have a nice bath. And we didn't follow it down. We happened to be in the temple when it was going out. So as you can see,
this is the active part of the temple that people come to for religious reasons.
I hope you can hear the sound. It's a little quieter for us than it was when we put it in. But Claire had been able to go through. There are some parts of the Hindu temple that we could not go to, and other parts we could go to. And I think, Claire, you were able to do this round, but you weren't able to go to the...
There was an inner sanctum that only Hindus were allowed into. You see, many of the women wore these absolutely beautiful floral adornments in their hair that were made out of beautiful, sweet-smelling flower. It's quite lovely being in line with them. And here everybody was putting their donations into a very large donation box.
And this is the inner area of the same temple. This looked like a school group that was coming in.
Peter and I got separated at this point somehow.
Yeah. And this was overlooking the temple, so I think this is on the last day we were meandering around the little temples that we saw at the top here. Quite beautiful. And it was time for us to be heading off out. And so later on the last day, we got the same tuk-tuk that had brought us in on the first day. He drove us a different route back to Hasapeti because we were in no hurry to get back. He took us through the farmlands, and we sometimes had to stop and wait for the goats and the sheep to go by. And this was a load of sugarcane being brought in. And as it happened, we went past a place where it was being processed. And they would chew it all up, and they would take the sap. This is a machine that was just chewing it all up. And the wood that came from it, the cane, was used to heat the furnace. And they would boil down the sweet sugarcane syrup and make jaggery out of it, which is a lovely sort of caked sugar. You can use for cooking or in your drinks or just eating. Bad for your teeth. So now we were leaving Hampi, and we took the overnight train back to Bengaluru. We had another night in the Pelican Hotel, picked up our other 3 bags and potted around for the day. When we got into Bengaluru, and this probably was our most exciting tuk-tuk ride, because it was about 4:35, 5:30 in the morning. It was all dark, and we had decided just to take a tuk-tuk and go up to the flower market, which we'd not been able to find before for some reason. And our guy seemed to know where he was going, and he jumped in and went off in an unknown direction.
And there was a traffic jam of tuk-tuks at 5 in the morning.
So you see it gets busier here, and we have no idea what these people were riding up for. Clearly wasn't going around and not make progress. So this is where we started hanging on a little more tightly. Anyway, he did take us all the way to the flower market. Here's the flower market, and this was also quite fascinating.
We don't know where all the flowers went. People use flowers for religious reasons. We've seen a lot of in Nepal.
Peter and Claire, if I interrupt you, are you able to lower the volume on the video so that we can hear you talk?
Good. I don't think we are. But why don't I just pause it there? It's the easiest way. There we go. We'll just pause it there.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's an absolutely enormous flora market. These are marigolds, which have a religious significance, and they're sold as wreaths and hair adornments and so forth. They're sold by the meter, and it was just amazing watching these guys throwing the stuff like cowboys throw ropes up here. And in some places we saw them putting the flowers onto the string. This place is where they were selling the floral ropes.
Paul, I'm going to try dropping the volume a little bit because we have almost no volume here, so it's just the way it divides it. So let me know if it's a problem to you. This is a vegetable market. Is that better?
Yes, it's good.
We were attracted to this very gentle cow pulling an enormous load and being very, very peaceful and quiet in the market.
Look at the size of the load that its owner is going to take on his back. But again, another wonderful market. On the left there, I think it's pan that they would chew, and you can see how they put the betel nut into that. It was a fascinating, I know we must have spent 3 or 4 hours there, and then we found a place for breakfast. And it was time now to be back on the train again, this time going down to Madurai, which is a somewhat longer trip.
So
and
that's Peter's pillow coming down. He was in the upper berth.
I didn't know if Claire was awake or not. And I may be showing my age here, so go ahead, Claire, you can see out the window, because this is quite lovely.
Yeah, it's absolutely lovely. We're beginning to get into the hillier part of the Tamil Nadu area. So we're heading to Madurai, which we had read about, and it has a very, very famous temple also in the Davidian style, and we really wanted to see it. It turns out, this may or may not be correct, I've only read it in one unofficial place, but that every 12 years they have to replace and refinish a lot of it. And unfortunately, we must have hit that 12th year, so we didn't get to see it as much of it as we would have liked to. Those are Peter's feet.
I like the top bunk, but my feet are sensitive when I first get up in the morning, so I didn't like the stairs especially. But I didn't realize I was being filmed. But when we did get to Madurai, we had one of the nicest hotels that we stayed in the whole trip. Oops, that's Paul again.
You know, this is, having had 2 nights on the train, we thought we deserved this rather gorgeous hotel.
Absolutely stunning.
We had a room that, you know, a small family could have easily slept in. Beautiful, beautiful floors. But you'll see the pièce de résistance was our own private plunge pool. You're just getting a view of it there.
It's our bedroom.
This was our we needed cell phones to reach each other once we were in bed.
These beautiful pillars. I don't know about the style of luxury.
And this was our own personal plunge
This is our own
pool,
personal
which was
plunge
lovely.
pool.
It wasn't heated, but it, you know, in that climate, it was very
cold,
comfortable.
really.
And down at the end is our bathroom.
So this is our
So this is Madurai.
This is really the centre of Madurai and has an enormous temple, and it is clearly a pilgrimage destination. They have enormous queues of people going in there. We were not allowed to take cameras or smartphones in, and so we can't show you the inside at all, but just show you a little of the outside.
It was the same. So they were. This was perhaps the 12th year, the year that they repaired it. It has 4 major towers, as the one in Hampi did, and they were all being repaired in one stage or another of repair. This one, we have a little video we'll put on next, and you'll watch. Somebody at the bottom is passing those bamboo pieces up to somebody at the top, who keeps expanding the grid. And as you watch it, count how many people there, without any harnesses whatsoever, are passing the stake from one to the other.
So count the...
So there's the first guy. No, in shorts, no safety harness, no nothing. There's number 2, and onward and onward.
4, 5, 6, 7 coming into view, 8, and the 2 top ones.
The guy at the top is actually tying it in. And as you can see, it's all bamboo, and I don't know what the attachment stuff is made, but...
And there's the next pole going up. So, time for us then to head on to Sri Lanka. So what can we say about Sri Lanka? We flew across. It's about an hour's flight from Madurai, so this is pretty straightforward. If you look at what size Sri Lanka is, if you stuck it on Ireland, it'd be about the same size on the left there, and if we stuck it on the northwest here, it would cover a good part of Washington and the Greater Vancouver area, so not very big. It's had its troubles, as you probably remember. They were in a civil war for about 25-30 years. The Tamil minority, which had migrated largely in from India the previous century, and then the Sinhalese, who occupy the more prosperous part of Sri Lanka. They show on the left there in the yellow where the best agricultural land is, and then in the centre there's kind of a mountainous area. We had been reading a book called Brotherless Night, which is an interesting account, fictional or fictionalized history account of the Troubles. And interesting, there's a film that you can watch called No More Tears, Sister, from the National Film Board, which actually is the interview with one of the women whose sister is a character in the book. So it recommended and gave us a sober background to the rest of the country.
We had a couple of days before we joined the rest of the cycling group, and found a lovely little hotel, as you can see on the right, beautiful food. And then we were able to go out with a guide on one of these very narrow boats. I don't think we have a picture.
It's a sort of dugout and has a kind of
It's a dugout canoe, very narrow. It's barely big enough for for a small bum to sit in. And that's what they fish from. So we were out on a recreational trip.
And that was on the lagoon you see on the left there. And we took a tuk-tuk from there up to where our friends were staying, and that's where our bike trip was going to be going from. And that's the pool in Negumbo, or north of Negumbo. And that's their swimming pool, which is a little grander. As we walked back from their place, we had heard about a fish market, and we wanted to go to the fish market the next day, but we walked down through Negumbo, and this is San Sebastian Church, which was quite a beautiful church. There was a small ceremony church. It's a Catholic church, and there was a ceremony going on on the outside behind where we are here as we went in, so we walked around rather quietly. And the main part of the nave of the church was open, and it's only later that we found out that this is where they had some bombings on Easter Sunday a few years back, and 100 odd people were killed in this church as one of the bombings on that day. We did go to find the fish markets, and that meant getting up at, I think, 4 o'clock in the morning. And
we had to be there at 4.
We were taken up by the person who ran our B&B, and he dropped us off, and we plunged in.
Yeah, it was absolutely remarkable. All of the boats come in. Some of the boats go out just for the day. Some go out for far longer than that. And they bring their catch in. There's a fish market every day except Sunday. And they bring in and auction all the fish off. We watched this enormous, this is the end of a long struggle, watching about 6 guys pulling something of enormous weight from the hole. And we couldn't figure out what it was until it finally became visible here. And this would be part of the fish auction. So we didn't work out what the system was, because a number of these fish that were the same variety must have come from more than one boat. But they were all laid out, and they were weighed.
Obviously marked, so somebody must have been keeping track.
Somebody knew. So you can see the guys there taking bids. We couldn't tell who was bidding.
As this proceeds, just look at the people and see if you can guess who's actually making the bid. I think these are tuna. It's a very slight head movement, so you really can't tell.
Yeah.
So, if you know the answer, do tell us. And then this is just the rest of that is, again, a photographer's challenge, because it really was quite dark. And once the fish would be bought, often they were being cut up locally or passed into the areas outside where there were people just cutting them up and selling them retail. So just a fascinating, busy evening. Now, we hadn't been sure about it, because some people said it was a wet fish market and there was a dry fish market, and some said it was one side of the river and some the other.
Some said it was at 4 in the morning, and some said it was in the afternoon.
And they were all right.
It turned out that there were 2 fish markets. So this is the dry fish market. And the fish is brought in those small, very decorative boats, and then just dried on the sand.
And some of these they would walk out with a net and bring up a very fine mesh net and pull in some very small fish.
Some of the fish were quite gorgeous, actually.
And they also here dry the fish, and they soak them in these barrels in salt water for, I believe, about 3 or 4 days, wasn't it, Claire? And then they put them out on the beach to dry for another few days.
And this is what they look like, the final product.
And then they distribute them around the country. And that is the end of the fish market section. So now we joined the bike group. At long
last, we joined the bike group. So by this time, we'd been on the road for a month. Joined the group in Colombo, and we just loved this. Since we were about to start our cycling trip, it was a very interesting food place to find.
Anyway, the 2 maps, one on the left, we started in the mid-coast on the left, and you'll see that large central mountainous area. So we circumnavigated and then went up and over it. And then if you look at on the right, the yellow bits are the bits we actually bicycled. The red bits are the bits that we rode in the bus with our bikes in the van. And this linked up some places of interest, and probably also linked us up through the more rideable areas where there was less traffic and it was more interesting.
They found the best possible places for us to ride. I think out of the 12 days we were on the road, we only spent in total an hour on roads with cars.
Yeah.
It was really beautifully plotted for us.
But we rode around
This is the
500
gang.
kilometers altogether in the 12 days or so. So this was just as we were leaving with the little bus behind. Our senior guide is the fellow on the right in blue, a terrific fellow. And these were some of the others. So second guide on the left, the next guy was the general factotum, the next one is the bus driver, and the next one is, I can't remember what they all are. The mechanic, he was the major
We had a
mechanic.
bike mechanic there.
Now, a few of us had push bikes, that is ones that you actually pedal, and we pedaled ours, but we had assistance from electricity, as did 2/3 of us, I suppose.
Well, there were, how many of us?
14.
I think there were 14 of us, and 4 were on regular bikes. And the bikes were quite a mishmash. One of the 4 regular bikes was, in fact, it might well have been this one. It was a mountain bike with thick, knobbly tires, and one of our female friends was pushing that the whole way and should have gotten a PhD for it. The rest of us were on e-bikes.
And the roads were quite variable. On the coast, it was just a quiet coastal road through villages, and then sometimes there were more isolated farm roads.
Notice the puddle. There is more to talk about puddles.
Yes.
Because
Sometimes through fields of crops, sometimes we would see animals or the marks of roaming elephants and watch kits that they had for it along the canals. Sometimes it was sunny like this.
most of the time it was not.
And sometimes it wasn't, and here we were able to shelter underneath something, but we might get quite saturated. This is kind of an interesting little...
Yeah, I think this was after the first day that we had gotten completely saturated.
We didn't need cash except for a tip. But our one friend
had brought nothing but cash, and it was all wet. So this was her drying out her cash in that evening.
So you can say pretty much we got pretty drenched every day.
We got drenched, out of 12 days of cycling, we got drenched to the skin on 10, or thereabouts.
But it was warm and we were happy at the end of the day. Now this one is sort of an interesting one. I don't know if you can hear that particular musical theme. But these little tuk-tuks were everywhere, and they always came with the same musical theme, no matter whose they were. And this had apparently been a downward trend prior to COVID. And then because people needed to be able to receive food at home, these came back into being. But it doesn't matter where you are, they all use the same
I hope you can hear it.
fleur-de-lis.
It's all fleur-de-lis, and after a while we would be singing fleur-de-lis at dinner, the whole group of us.
So this was our first major stop on the first day, and we weren't quite sure why we were stopping there. But if you look very carefully at some of these trees, perhaps this one over here, you can see that there are little knobs on the way up. And at the top left, you can perhaps see some lines connecting the palm trees. And there was a fellow who was going up, who would climb up there and go and harvest the rising sap from the palm tree. And that would go into making some alcohol. You could drink it raw, as we did there, just to taste it. It's not...
Or fermented.
Yeah, or they would ferment it and have it as a kind of arak. Now, this is a place called Dambala, and this was the main destination the second day. And it's a hill about 600 feet high with about 80 caves in it. And there are 5 major caves that have been taken over since about 2 or 3 centuries BC and have been decorated, as you'll see inside. And there are about, I think there are about 130 Buddhas in these 5 caves. And they are of diminishing size, and the roofs are painted. So there are hundreds of paintings, and clearly, again, another major pilgrimage spot.
And so one nice thing about the trip was that although it was a cycling trip and we did a lot of cycling, they tried to work in some of the bigger highlights that non-cycling tourists would see, and this was one of them. It was very, very impressive. I think the oldest one was from the 3rd century.
I think that's right.
And the newest one was from about the 15th.
There seem to have been 2 or 3 steps through more recent history where the paintings are being redone, and then the buildings down the outside, and they'd put in a drip spot where it was sort of a trench along the rock, so any water running down the rock wouldn't damage the paintings.
But it's interesting. So where we started, it was all Catholic, 85% Catholic, where Peter showed that the picture of the church. And here we are into an area that's entirely Buddhist. And then we moved on into an area that was entirely Hindu.
This was a place called Sigiriya, another major, massive national monument. And in the background there, it's called the Lion Rock, which is what Sigiriya is when translated. And the people here, I think there had been a palace up on the top, and the gardens down below were all nourished with a system of water that was directed into this flat area, so that there's particularly beautiful gardens there. We walked through this and then up the rock. That's an aerial view of the rock, so you can see how they had built at the top. And then the walkways that we went on were up around the left side there. So we would go through some of these boulders and head up first to the first stage and then to the second stage.
And you can see the zigzag going up to the top. It was pretty steep. It felt very secure, but it was very steep.
Okay. As we got to the top, it was starting to cloud over a little bit. They had this this tank up top, yes, again. And in fact, here it was really starting to rain. You can see some people with their hoods up and then umbrellas going up there. And as we went down, it was starting to get a little bit fierce. So this is the staircase down.
Some people were starting to have umbrellas.
I was being followed by this little girl and her mum. I thought I'd better wait just in case the girl came surfing by. But it didn't seem to affect the construction. It seems to be a fairly routine thing. And all the stairs were quite wet. We were obviously a little bit soaked. This used to be one of our wetter days. And so once we'd all gathered, we went off and we met a guy with a tuk-tuk. In fact, there were several tuk-tuks. And we all piled in and went off into the countryside. So this was going to be for lunch. And the countryside was also pretty wet, as you can see.
The rain was, this was me drying out my scarf. But they had these fires going, the room was warm, the food was delicious and warming. And every place they took us for lunch, they made a point of giving us things that were different, that were regional, explaining how it was made and
kindly, not too hot.
And telling people when it was hot.
Yeah.
Some of it was quite hot.
And they were demonstrating various things to us. The use of a rice grinder at the top left, winnowing the rice and the husks in the center. And then she showed us how they use some of the rushes to make the roofs for these. They just plat them. So they weave them. They have to replace them every year or two, I think. And so it was still quite wet when we came to our hotel. And I'm not sure, the flowers are floating in water. And then this wonderful pool.
But it was a great pool.
Well, we did go in it. Okay, Kandy. This is in the more mountainous central area, and if you look in the water's edge, more or less just to the left of center here, that's the old hotel we were staying in, which is a pretty grand matron. It wasn't the one we were supposed to stay in, but for some reason ours wasn't available. And it had a pretty nice bedroom, as you see there, and the old style of elevator. It was a lovely dowager hotel. Kandy, the lake itself, we walked around. It was about an hour's walk around. Big monitor lizard on the left there. Some rather large bats sleeping in the trees.
Bats, yeah.
And
flowers.
And there was a wedding.
It was an auspicious day, so there were many weddings.
Yeah. This was the site of a world or the World Buddhist Museum, and it represents many countries, and we went around that. Inside. Then we were more up into the hilly area, so if you look in the far side of the valley, and that's the road that we actually went down.
That we cycled down.
That was a lovely downhill ride. That was our lunch stop of the day.
More puddles.
This one you were able to get through without getting off the bike.
But you had to go fast.
You had to go fast. And then we, up at the top, we walked for an hour or two and came to this wonderful falls. And there we had some company of these enormous monkeys. I think this is a purple-faced langur monkey.
It was a langur, yeah.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name of this beast. Just ignored us.
And it was wet again.
And it was wet then, but we weren't given the option of riding off on the bus. We were told that we had to ride. And we took a picture of this wonderful little police car on the right, this little police tuk-tuk, not realising that somebody inside it, who we then saw and waved cheerfully to, and he wasn't coming out to get wet. So riding downhill. And that day we finished up at a train. There's a train that goes around there, which is just for fun. They do have a reasonably extensive train system in Sri Lanka, and some of our numbers had ridden it from either from or to the north at the end of the trip.
But this was a tourist train.
It was a tourist train. They had an open car. This is the countryside that we went through, and we had some music to keep us going. I wasn't sure this was Sri Lankan. It sounded almost North Central American, but it was cheerful. And that's where the train finished up. So we had a round trip of that. So now we're getting towards the southern part of the country. We went up into this farming area, and they had this lovely resort built around a little lake with some very nice rooms off it that they'd put us up at. Again, a room that we couldn't do justice to, the food that we could. The next day we were taken to a wildlife area where they have fairly large reserve, and we had a sort of a mini safari going around, mainly to see the elephants.
So many elephants and many peacocks. This one of these little guys decided to check me out and came up and nuzzled me with his trunk. Quite sweet.
And then, this is on the south coast, and it was a nice place. We stayed there. And in the hotel there was some discussion as to whether you could go to the sandy beaches where the turtles were laying eggs. And so Claire
For some reason, only 3 of us wanted to go. I was one of them. And it was very strange. Until the last minute, we had no idea if we were actually going to see it. But the fellow was illuminating the place, the hole that had already been dug by the turtle. And the eggs were being dropped maybe 1 per second. That just went on. And then finally, he stamped on the ground, or he actually hit the ground very hard with a rod, and I guess scared the poor turtle, and it took off back down to the sea, which was kind of unfair. But the eggs by that time were all buried, completely buried in sand, and by morning you wouldn't know they were there.
This was the last place we stayed up in Gali.
This was after the. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this is the last place. So we were in Gali for a day. It's an old, I think this was a Portuguese town, wasn't it? Settled way back. And lovely just to walk around, small town. And it was the last place we stayed with our organisers. And the next day it was about a 4-hour ride back up to Colombo. In Colombo, Claire and I had found a nice little place. Again, when we have something like this, we like to have a couple of 3 days spare on either end, so we don't finish up having to rush against the clock. So although some of our friends were heading off that day, we had another couple of nights, and a particularly pretty place. And we'll just let you see this. Its name wasn't Asthma, but it was something very like that.
Aathma.
Yeah, and it was quite funky and quite beautiful, and just wonderful to end the trip with.
That was our room at the top of the steps on the left.
On the left, yeah. That was the dining area, but we mostly ate outside, either here or out here. And we went to a museum, that's right, but there was a nice museum in Colombo. We visited a nice hotel that had some excellent historic photographs of some of the writers from the beginning of the last century. So we dropped in there and had a drink, and then took the tuk-tuk back. It was a nice town to have a little time to spend in. These were actually in one of the museums, but these are replicas of the drawings that were on the Lion Rock that you saw, the one where the rain was coming down.
we couldn't take these pictures, but they're beautiful.
Yeah. And this was the last of our place there. That's it. So that
That is it.
is all there is to it. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Claire and Peter. Um, I'm going to let you stop sharing.
I'd love to. Come on.
I can see it here, stop share right at the bottom.
So
I can see it too. It's just not live.
Oh,
can we?
Can you unhost me?
I'm going to see if I can
I've got
stop
it.
this
That'll
share.
work now. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, good.
You did that.
We need to get
And
over here.
maybe you can make yourself live again. Video live.
Yep.
Coming.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so
That was a very interesting presentation and a very unusual type of trip, like the ones you tend to do. Did you choose to go there in the rainy season, or is it always rainy in Sri Lanka?
After the fact, we were told that it never rains after January 15th.
and before we had read it doesn't rain after
in
New Year's Day.
January. So it was supposed to have been dry by then, but
In the final analysis, it didn't really matter. There were 2 days when I had to actually quit because we were riding on the road. There was heavy rain. I didn't have a fender on the front wheel, so the water was coming up at my face and getting in my eyes, and I just couldn't see, and I kept wiping my eyes and still couldn't see.
With grit.
So I just stopped and waited for the bus to come along, and I just rode the last bit. But once we got into the place, it didn't matter.
But interestingly, I mean, I get cold very easily, and I never got cold in the rain because it's warm. And even though we had some of the most fantastic downhill rides I think I have ever had in my life, and when we were soaking wet, and you'd think you'd be cooling off pretty quickly, but we really didn't. It was surprisingly comfortable. The only problem, I mean, obviously our visibility was limited when we were in the rain, and we had to spend a lot of time looking for puddles because there were many of them, and many of the bikes didn't have fenders, so we often came home in the evening quite muddy. But it was a great trip.
And the people looking after us were excellent.
Yeah, they really were.
So I'll open it up to the group to see if anybody has any comments or questions for the two of you.
And there's the group.
Has anybody been to Hampi or Sri Lanka? No volunteers?
Your
Okay.
hand over there, Philip and Emby
Oh, Philip,
and Linda.
could you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, we saw the Tooth of Buddha. Did you? At Kandy?
Oh, we missed
yes.
it.
Which
Did we see the Tooth of Buddha?
Yes,
Candy.
Yes, we did. It was the I can't remember. It was in that complex. We did.
Yeah.
Claire was paying attention. I was probably sneaking around taking another photograph or two.
It was a very special occasion. And we also rode on the Sir Richard Maitland, that train that took us up from Colombo to Kandy and back again.
Oh,
did you
that
really?
would have been
Yes.
lovely. No,
Yeah. It's a steam train.
We were only on it for a couple of hours.
Yeah,
right?
that was a tourist bit, but
We went to Ella,
We
wasn't it?
had wondered about going to Jaffna and then taking the train down, but getting to Jaffna was a bit of a problem. There's supposed to be a ferry there, but we just could not find exactly when and if it ran, and so in the end we took the flight to Negombo to Colombo. So we didn't go on the service train, but others did, and I think it was enjoyable. Yeah.
And seeing all the people on the route beside the train was really interesting because they would bicycle beside the train and they'd wave at you, and it was, yeah, we met some really lovely people, along the route as well as on the train. It was interesting.
What's so interesting in a place like that, or we spend a lot of time in Nepal. Nepal had a 10-year civil war. These people had a 30-year civil war, 33-year civil war. And when you meet the people, they're so nice. It's hard to imagine that kind of vitriol had driven a long-lasting civil war. But of course, we don't live there, and we don't know the niceties or the badities of it. Mm. But most of the people we met were warm, welcoming, helpful.
Yeah, we found that too.
Our guide told us a story about when he had on the day of the Easter bombings that they had a few years ago. He was, as a guide then, in one of the hotels, and he was at the reception desk, and the would-be suicide bomber was seen on the security cameras walking past him, and apparently the explosive failed to detonate, and eventually this person left and blew themselves up somewhere else. And he was unaware of that until he saw it on the news a couple of days later and recognized that he'd been there. So that was, a very close thing for him. And, that was an Islamic thing. That wasn't even part of the disagreement between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. But we didn't see any problems, and we didn't have any problems, and yeah.
Could you tell us how long you spend organizing such a trip?
A good question.
We do a lot of this, and at the end of it, I have said to Peter many times, whatever you pay a travel agent, they're worth it.
Okay.
The number of hours Peter spent just getting the Indian trains organized was amazing.
It works quite well, and you have to pay $2 to be able to do anything on their website. So you first have to register so you can register, and then you can buy the tickets and so forth. And I decided to change them, but they have about 10 different banks you can pay through, the first 6 of which would not accept a Van City visa. And I was just about to give up, and I tried one more, and it accepted it. And then when I wanted to reimburse one because I was cancelling it, it went through immediately. And I think that it does work well, and they're unbelievably cheap. It's a lot cheaper to take an overnight train trip than it is to stay in a hotel.
And it's definitely an
very
adventure.
Comfortable. Yeah, very comfortable. So how long did we spend? Well, when we started planning, because the
Hampi thing, of course, we had known about it well in advance. So, and it was not hard. The UNESCO World Heritage Site has all the information you could possibly want about Hampi itself. And finding a B&B there was not difficult.
That was Booking.com.
That was
the biking group had put together the idea about a year before, because a relative of one of our number had been there and enjoyed it. And I think we firmed up the deal about 6 months before. And then the arrangement to go to Nepal at that particular time was still fluid until about 6 or 8 weeks before we went. And that all fell into place. And we were able to put in the 10 days between the two main destinations.
Right.
So yeah, it takes a lot of time.
Okay, well, thanks both of you for a very interesting and somewhat exciting presentation, especially the videos of all the noise and commotion that exists in that part of the world. What I would like to say is that next month, we're going to have a presentation by Tony Chow, October the 9th. It's early in the month. And he's going to talk to us about his recent experience going back to Hong Kong and to China. And then in November on the 13th, Jeff Davis is going to talk to us about his trip to Antarctica. So 2 quite different types of presentations. We hope that many of you will be there. We're now looking for people to present in January, February, March, April, May, and June of 2026. So if you are interested, please send me an email. Let me know when you would like to present and what you want to present about. As I often say, if you think you just have a short presentation, we are sometimes able to just hook up another presentation to go with the short one. So we have 2 short presentations and 2 sets of presenters, and that has worked quite well in the past. So you don't have to just have a presentation that will take up 45 minutes, an hour as this presentation was. You can have a shorter thing, and we'll try to match you up with some other presenter. I hope to encourage people who've never presented before at this group to put their names forward. The more the merrier. And everybody has a different perspective on going to the same place. So even if we've talked about it before, I'm sure your presentation will be quite different. So thank you all for attending. Thanks again to Peter and Claire. It was wonderful. And we look forward to seeing you again in a month.